Hey everyone, so today's video I'm finally going to be lowering the truck with the BoostedMotorsports 2/4 kit, 2 inches lower in the front, 4 inches lower in the rear. And for this video I'm probably just going to focus on the front lowering aspect of it, and then we'll do a separate video for the rear. What we're going to do, and you guys can probably see behind me, we have the truck over here. And I know, myself included, it would make more sense to obviously use the lift, right? But the car right now doesn't have a transmission in it. I don't have somebody to help me push it outside and do all that. I just want to really get the belltech 2/4 in there. So I'm going to do it old-fashioned way. It's jammed in the corner here of the truck, but I want to get cracking on this stuff. Like I said, it probably could, well, obviously could be better done on the lift, but whatever. I'm just going to do it on the floor since it's over here. And like I said, this thing is kind of not functional right now, so I can't just pull this out and put the truck here. So I'm gonna end up doing it on the floor, which is probably the way most people, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, would do it anyways. So maybe it might be a little bit better for you guys to see it done that way. So first things first, I know you guys are probably gonna say it's very close to the wall. I know, I get it, but we have the parking brake engaged. We're gonna put it up. The front wheels have to be 4 to 6 inches off the ground to do this procedure, according to BoostedMotorsports, because the spring is going to expand once we have it ready to come out. So you have to give room for the spring and the control arm to expand and lower itself to be able to get the springs out and the struts. So anyways, I'm gonna get this thing jacked up, take a look at what we got, and then once I kind of figure out the one side and exactly how we're gonna do it, then I will show you the whole process. And just so you guys have a reference point, I'm sure, you know, if you guys, your truck's already stock, you guys probably already know where it sits or how it sits. Mine's probably not the best reference right now, I'll be completely honest with you, because I have 17-inch wheels in the front, which are about 31-inch tires, and I have 20-inch, even though they look very similar, these are actually 20s in the rear. The reason I had this is just for a drag setup, that I had 20s in the back. I popped them off through the 17-inch on the back because they have the drags on them, so I have the 17-inch wheels here with the drag tires with the 17-inch stalkers in the front, and this was just literally to get me to the track, and then I'd pop these off. I also have the Hellcat 24-inch wheels over there, which are going to go along nicely with the lowering kit, but this kind of gives you an idea of how tall or short my truck is stock. So chopping 4 inches out of that is going to be a pretty big difference. Again, the 24-inch Hellcat wheels are slightly taller than the stock 33s, I believe, just ever so slightly. So it's going to be a little bit taller than that, the stock wheel, and then chop 4 inches out of it. It's going to tuck things down substantially. So that's what we're looking at. And then again, the fender gap up here, it looks a little bit more than maybe stock per se, because this is a smaller 17-inch wheel, but with the 24s in there, the 24s, honestly, the fender gap is probably about there, and then we chop 2 inches out of this. It's gonna be almost flushed up. So should be pretty exciting, pretty interesting to see how it looks, but let's get cracking. All right, so this is actually going, I don't wanna jinx myself, but it's going pretty smoothly. It's not too difficult, really, you guys. The belltech, I don't even want to reference the belltech instructions, because honestly they're not that good, they're not that accurate. It kind of gives you some extra steps which are, in my opinion, unnecessary. They tell you to take out the ABS sensor, you know, remove it with the I think it's a 6mm Allen key, but really you don't need to remove it. There's no reason to. You can just unplug it from over here. There's a plug on the back side, you probably see right there, there's a plug there. You unplug it, put it over here so it's not going to do anything. These things are pretty fragile. On my 2009 with the lifted, it was a 4x4 lifted truck, you can break these pretty easy, and they're not cheap. Well, they might be cheap aftermarket, but OEM is not cheap. So rather than mess with it, try to break it, or you know, potentially break it, just disconnect it. There's no reason to take it out. Belltech tells you to do otherwise, but you can just disconnect it, put it out of your way. That's that. Other thing is the tie rod has to come out. It's pretty easy. Belltech says it's a 22mm nut. It's actually a 21, at least on my truck it is. So you loosen the 21mm nut. If things start spinning, you have a 10mm hex on the end of the ball joint, and you can stop it from spinning. So you loosen that, give it a few taps with a hammer. I'm not using anything crazy, just a regular, you know, carpenter's hammer, and a few good taps on here. That comes out. Same thing with this. So this is a 21mm, this is a 10mm. If you need to hold it, you loosen it, but don't take it completely off, but get it pretty far down so that the thread lock on the actual nut is already passed, so that you're not sitting there having to struggle with it later and hold the 10mm. So I took it off pretty far down, gave it a few good whacks here, but you do want to support it with the jack. I have jack stands, don't worry, but you want to support the actual control arm with the jack, because once this lets go, all you're dealing with is the spring coming flying out. Another thing you have to take off is the tie rod end link, which I believe was a 18mm. No, it wasn't an 18mm. Anyways, I'll double check or confirm the sizes with you guys. I think it was like a 16, I want to say. I think this is a 16mm nut, and it has a 7mm hex on the top to hold it. So that comes off, and now we are pretty much ready to just let the jack down, and the spring is going to come out. Also, the caliper, you just take it off. It's, again, they said 22mm, I believe they said, and it's actually a 21mm. These bolts here, 20mm head, those both have to come out, and then two 13mm on the bottom of the shock. So I kind of skipped that step, but I'll show you guys on the other side. The shock comes out. Ideally, you'd want the truck to be a bit higher, because I had to play a bit of a game getting it out. But you take the nut off the top, which is an 18mm nut, and the two 13s in the bottom, and the shock just drops straight out the bottom. I had to kind of play with it on an angle to get it out, because you can see that the height of the shock is actually longer than the ground clearance we have right now, given how high it is. So just keep that in mind when you guys jack it up, that you do want to jack it up a bit more, but these jack stands don't go too much higher, so that's what we're dealing with, but you can still manage like I did. Anyways, I'm going to lower the jack now, and the spring should come out. All right, you guys, here's the difference in height. If I can balance and run the camera at the same time, it's pretty obvious difference. It's about, honestly, it's about 2 inches off the spring, which is what it's supposed to be on the actual body. It's 2 inches lower as well, but the springs look about 2 inches shorter. These coils do look thicker than these ones, so assuming stiffer. And yeah, we just have to transfer this rubber piece. So I gotta pry this off. It's been stuck there for 114,000 miles. So I gotta pry this thing off, put it back on there, and then we can actually start putting this thing together. So hopefully it should go fairly smoothly. But like I said, I'm gonna kind of rip this side through and get this side done before I kind of walk you step by step on the other side. So we now have a mess of tools, but it isn't even loaded, as in the vehicle's weight isn't even on the suspension. You can already tell just how much shorter this is gonna be. I don't wanna get too worried, but it is gonna be pretty low. The offset wheel I have is a pretty low offset, so it's gonna be pretty close to the fender. I guess we'll have to see how it goes. One of the things is I do have an aftermarket fender liner on this side. And just a side note, don't buy an aftermarket fender liner, because they fit like garbage. This is sticking way in. This top portion is collapsed and it's supposed to be way up. I mean, it's in here and the hole's lined up, but other than that, it's pretty garbage. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is gonna start dragging on my wheel when the wheel is closer up in here, but we'll have to wait and see. Honestly, if it starts dragging on this, other than the annoyance, I don't really care about it tearing this thing up, because I think I'm just gonna have to go and bite the bullet and get an OEM one, because this thing is garbage. They sent me a replacement one, but I don't know it's gonna be any better than this one. So if this one ends up getting chewed up, I might just cut out a portion of it temporarily, or try to drill a hole and keep it up and where it's supposed to be, because it's like right here drags quite a bit, this part when I go full lock, so I already know that, but up here is where I'm worried about it actually hitting. So anyways, this side is done. I'm gonna move over, well, with the exception of the sway bar end link. I didn't put it on just because I'm not sure. I don't want to tie the two wheels together. Obviously the sway bar connects that wheel to the other, so if I'm going to be dropping that side, I don't want this side to conflict with that. So I'm just going to leave the sway bar end link, the washer and the rubber bushing off for now, and we'll move to the other side, and now I will get into the step-by-step process of how I got this done. So once you get the wheel off, I'm going to start right from the basics. You're going to take the caliper off, which is a 21mm socket on the back. You put it on the back here, and if you turn the wheel like this, you can get a big fat gun in there like that, electric one, or if you're well off enough that you have an air gun, you'll definitely be able to get that in there. So we'll pop off the caliper, we're gonna hang it, support it over there out of the way, and also remove the rotor. So we'll pull those both off at the same time. One thing that I kind of do just preliminary is this clip here. for the ABS, it just slides in there. I just pop it off because once we start moving the brake line around, I don't want the ABS wire to go with it. So anyways, let's pop off those 221s, take the caliper off, and take the rotor off. Once the rotor and caliper are out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this ABS sensor. So there's a little clip in here that you can manipulate with a screwdriver. It's probably a little bit hard to see right now, but anyways, you just stick a screwdriver in there and the latch opens, and then of course your ABS sensor is going to be stuck to the back of this. You're going to see these two push tabs, if I can do it with one hand here. You're going to release the red locking tab, you're going to push it up, and if you want to make it easier for yourself, which I'm probably going to do right now, you can pull it off of the fender liner and just pry it off. These tabs will come out, and you can actually pull it down so you can see what the heck you're doing. So there it is there. We're going to push up on the locking tab, and this one's pretty stuck in here with the mileage, but you're going to pry out this red tab. Ooh, alright, there. Red tab is up, and we're going to squeeze the tab afterwards and slide this out. So there you go. So there is the ABS sensor, it's off. We can put it off out of the way. Next step is going to be, we can turn the wheel this way. You can actually pull it out right now. So we'll turn the wheels back straight. And what I'm gonna do next is we can do a combination of two things. So we'll probably next take off the tie rod end. So let me straighten this out and continue. So tie rod end is gonna be a 21 millimeter. Use a wrench for this. Shouldn't be on there too crazy, but there you go. So 21, usually the nice thing is the ball joint's going to stay fixed inside the spindle, so you won't have to worry about holding it from spinning just yet. So if you're lucky like I am, you'll just loosen it like this. So I'm going to loosen and take off this nut, and then I'll show you what's next. Okay, so now that the nut is loose, you can take it off. This one's not going to matter too much, and you're going to give it a few nice taps on the side of the spindle. And this will free the tie rod ends. I'm not sure how many taps it's going to take on yours, but there you go. So I'll take a few taps and then it'll come out. You can use a splitter too, ball joint splitter, but honestly you're not going to wreck anything with using a dinky little hammer. You might, freshen the surface a little bit like you see there, but nothing too crazy. There, that one's out. We can move on to the next. Next we're going to remove the sway bar end link. You're just going to be removing the top bushing, and that's going to consist of a 16 millimeter wrench and a 7 millimeter, oddly enough, to stop the sway bar end link from actually spinning. So you're going to put the two of them on there like so, and you're going to be attempting to tighten on the end here and loosen your nut. So you're just going to go like so, and you're going to take off this nut, which is tying the two together. Next step, we're going to move the top of the strut, which you're going to use a 9 millimeter socket to hold the strut from spinning, and then you're going to be using an 18 millimeter wrench to stop or to turn the nut off. So go ahead and remove the nut from the top of the strut. Okay, so you're going to remove the nut, the washer, and the rubber grommet off the top. We're going to set it aside for now. So now all that is almost left is we can take out the two 13mm bolts on the bottom of the strut and drop the strut out the bottom. So let's do that. So our next step is going to be to separate the upper ball joint. You're going to use a 21mm wrench to remove the nut. So we're going to get the nut almost to the ends of the thread. What I like to do is loosen it enough to where the nylon lock nut isn't fighting you anymore, because that just prevents or helps you not having to get something to hold the actual ball joint from spinning once you actually separate the two. So there we go. The threads are still on, but the nylon's not actually holding it. Now you'll want to get a jack to support the suspension, because once this comes flying out, you want it to be supported. So we have a jack supporting the suspension. What we're going to do now is same thing as before on the other ball joint. You're going to strike here and it's going to separate because this is under tension right now. So there you go, you can see it separated. Now we can put a bit more tension on the actual jack just so we can get the nut off. So there you go, we can remove the nut. This is going to free load and we can lower the jack, which is going to allow our spring to come out. So if you're trying to get the spring out, you're probably going to have to push down on this to break it free out of the rubber that's been stuck in for a million years. And there we are. Alright, so because we're going to lower the vehicle, we're going to actually have to take off these metal cups for the bump stops, so that we can install shorter bump stops that are progressive and just foam. So in order to do that, you're going to see two welds, one on this side, the one on the back. So you're going to have to either use an angle grinder, get in there to break free the weld, or a Sawzall. Either one will work, but I'm going to use an angle grinder because it's what we have on deck with just a thin cut blade, and we'll get cracking. Okay, so once you're done with that, just hit it with some black paint and it is off. So I don't have the bump stops on me right now, but we will be putting those in shortly. I'll show you which ones I'm going to use. My BoustedMotorsports kit didn't come with it because it was a used kit. Anyways, we're pretty much ready to put the spring back in. So you're going to transfer over this big donut, and there is a top and a bottom to these things. So pay attention to the way the coil goes, and that will tell you which way is top or bottom. Or you can look at the writing that's usually printed on the side, and the writing should read up. So if you take a look at this, you're going to see the writing like so. So we'll put that up, and you have to make sure that this coil bind fits into the bottom pocket here. So see that bottom pocket? So you want to make sure that the end of the coil sits back where it originally was, right in here. So you have to wind it so it fits in as such. And same thing with this. When you pop this thing off, you're going to see the same sort of thing where the end of the coil went through. In my case, because I have so many miles, it's right through. But you're going to situate that on the coil in the same fashion so that it is all locked and loaded and ready to go. So that's the situation with that. And then I'm going to set the camera down because this is kind of a two-hander. We're going to put the spring back in, use a jack to push the control arm back up, and everything back into place. Just before I do that though, I wanted to show you guys my ball joint, upper ball joint seal or boot. It is torn completely into two, and I'm just sliding the lower half off. And again, I have these energy suspension polyurethane ones right here, and these are a direct fit for what I have on there right now. So I'm just replacing this like so, taking off the bottom portion, and this is fitting beautifully right over the rest of the top. You kind of have to make sure that it guides over top, but like that, we have a perfect seal all the way around. We can pump grease in there. It's sealed nicely on the bottom. I'll link in the description below which ones I used, but this should keep my ball joints alive for a little bit longer, I would think. But I'll also pack some grease in there just to make sure. Now we'll take the spring, and you'll double check to make sure that the top is inserted where the old spring was, and be conscious of the bottom winding of the spring. When you insert this spring, whatever spring that may be, and make sure that it is seated in the same position. So then we're gonna push this and get this in here. You kind of have to play a little bit of a game to get it in. Double check your windings so that they're in the correct spot. Once you're happy with where they are seated, you can go ahead and lift your jack up. Start bringing everything together. And you do have to be conscious of the sway bar end link, so you can kind of see I already got ahead of myself. You got to go down a little bit so that you can get the sway bar end link back in there. That just saves you having to undo it. And then you also have to guide your upper ball joint into place. So that's where we are with that. And you're going to grab your nut for your upper ball joint, and you can start throwing that together at the same time. And you can continue to go up. It just makes things easier for yourself. Okay, so we come to the point where the nylon on the upper ball joint has grabbed. So we're gonna have to get the wrench. So we'll grab the correct size for that, and also the 21, and we'll tighten the upper ball joint. Okay, next I'm gonna move the caliper back down, since I had it resting up there with all the grinding that we had to do for that bump stop. So I just got this little bungee cord type deal that holds it. So I'll put this back on, and I'll support it from this side. Like so. So our caliper's out of the way. Now we can actually put the new strut in place. So with the strut, you're gonna probably have some hardware that comes with it. And depending on what kind of strut you got or what manufacturer, the hardware is either going to look satisfactory or not. So what I'm choosing to do is actually using the old bump stop hardware off the factory shock, since it has this kind of guide on it. So like I said, depending on what you got, you can kind of make a combination of everything. So I'm using that with this guide. The old bump stop washer doesn't go on the top, so I'll use one of their end plates, and it has different threads, so I'll use their nut. So that's my combination that I'm using. You guys can go ahead and use generic stuff or the Mopar stuff, whatever happens to work for yours. So anyways, what we'll do now is we'll slide the shock in from the bottom, and we'll put the nut on the top. Okay, so I actually did install the 13mm bolts holding the strut in, because it's going to help to push the strut up while we guide the top of the strut into that hole. So now we'll go ahead with those 13mm bolts on the bottom tight, and we'll lift our jack so that we can put the strut or guide it into place as we go up. So we're gonna want to center this. Okay, next step before we do the tie rod, we're gonna put the sway bar bushing on. So you're gonna get your bushing, the end washer or plate, and a 16mm nut. So we're gonna throw that on. And eventually for this kit, we're gonna be putting F150 because they're shorter end links. But now we'll put the stock ones on. So you're gonna use your 7mm socket, in my case, and your 16mm, and we're gonna tighten this down. Next up, we'll put the tie rod end on with the 21mm. So we'll spin this on, grab our 21mm wrench, and put this on. Next step, we'll put our rotor on. And grab our caliper with the 21mm bolts. And I'm going to turn everything this way so we can get the gun back in there and tighten them. And last step, we're going to reconnect our ABS sensor. So we're going to put it back into all the clips that we removed it from. Plug it back in like so. Put the red locking tab back in. Reattach it to the fender liner. And put this little clip in that retains it to the upper control arm. And that is all said and done. So this side is done, you guys. Everything's tight, and we can put the wheels back on. Woohoo! All right, you guys, we still have the stock ride height in the back, monster truck style. And without any settling, moving around, shifting, this is what we have in the rear and the front. What am I saying? The front. It's been a long night. So it is looking pretty stance at this point. My only concern is going to be with these low offset wheels. You guys can see they're pretty much flush with the fender. My concern is going to be if we hit any bumps, where this tire is going to end up. If it articulates inwards a little bit, we should be okay, but my first guess is going to be that we're going to have some rubbing issues. So I really like these wheels, so I don't know how we're going to address that. I don't really want to get different wheels, but we're going to have to take things as they come and see what happens. So I never had any rubbing issues before, stock ride height, but that's where we're at right now. I'm going to end this video right here, you guys. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe. I'll show you guys how things look after it settles, and once we get the rear done, which will be in hopefully the next video. So anyways, you guys, we'll see you on the next one. Take care.